Hello and welcome to the Deaf Culture and the Community Lesson 1. This is the first video presentation related to this topic. Today I'd like to focus our discussion on why it is important to learn about culture at large, in addition to learning about deaf culture and the community, and what benefits you will see in today's discussion. I want to pose a situation now, an example, so you can understand the lesson a little bit more about general culture. A businessman went to an Arabic country. They do not have a great deal of technology, do not have machines to wash clothes. So this gentleman thinks that it would be a perfect opportunity to market his wares. He goes and begins to advertise this using this photo that you will see now. As you can see from the picture, this businessman is advertising to recruit people into purchasing washing machines. He tries to advertise this for some time to no avail. No one seems to want to buy this machine. And it's puzzling. He believes the picture is very clear. You have dirty pants on one side, washing machine in the center, followed by clean pants after that. The concept seems very clear. But in fact, this fails because of the differing language. In English, we look from left to right. The dirty pants go into the washing machine and become clean. It follows the same tense as English. In Arabic language, it goes in reverse, from a right to left perspective, as you can see in the second picture. Putting the dirty pants, if you look at it from an English perspective, you're putting clean pants into a washing machine to become dirty. And that's a conflict for culture. Another example we can show you, the same businessman needs and tries to market his wares again at a restaurant. The businessman is eating food, bread with one hand, and people look at him, others look at him, puzzled and disrespectfully. The reason for that, can you imagine why? Hands. Hands are very important. Right hands are used for formal items like eating. The left hand is considered dirty. Arabic people use their left hands for things like the toilet, dirty items, dirty things, as opposed to in America, the flushing of the toilet is done. We don't have anything. They don't even use toilet paper. They use water, and it's always done with the left hand. Now, seeing a businessman eat with his left hand is viewed upon with disdain. So going to market his washing machines, you can see that would also play into the fact, because the culture sees the whole person. He went in without a full understanding of the culture. Now apply that to deaf culture, very similar principles apply here. Now you who are wanting to become future interpreters working with deaf people, there are some of the similar cultural rules that you need to understand among deaf culture, the deaf community. The cultural norms that you will find. If you know these, you'll have better relations. I like to add some of the polite excuses. Some people use that's deaf culture or that's not deaf culture as excuses for a number of items. There are some that should not be used. Deaf culture should not be used as an excuse, but it does happen. And in some situations, it would be acceptable as a cultural norm. I want to talk to you about a few situations where it's not a good example. I'll give you an example here right now. walking along and just knocking into another person, just running into a person and say, sorry, that's deaf culture, and walking along. That's not the case. That is not polite. There are other ways. For example, just a tap on the shoulder, a little nudge here to know that a person is coming through will move you along, not interrupt the conversation, and it's more polite. It's not bumping into a person. That's deaf culture. Is not an acceptable response. Another example, I remember a time at a dorm. It was a long hallway, dorm doors all along down this hallway, and two deaf people were talking, and they were sitting legs up across the hallway, just chatting away. And what happened was an older woman was walking down the hallway, and there was a blockage between the two. She couldn't. She tried to say "excuse me." They ignored her. The woman kind of stepped over, climbing over the conversation. Yes, it is deaf culture to sit looking at each other, a visual environment. Sitting next to each other is possible, but it's more comfortable across from each other. But ignoring the older woman is disrespectful. They could have just very simply moved their legs, and that's really not acceptable as a deaf culture excuse. Another instance happened that I'm aware of. Two deaf people were driving along at night. They had been out to a party. They had had a few drinks, and they were driving along. Inside the car, the interior light is on, and they're talking while they're driving, and just talking away. Inadvertently, a person walked across the street who was also deaf, and without knowing, they hit this person. The person was killed on impact. Going on, they ended up going to court, and her argument was, I'm sorry, it's not my fault because of deaf culture. The light had to be on so I could see the talk. It's the same thing as a hearing person would have talking while they're driving. They weren't paying attention, but that's not really acceptable. No. Regardless of the fact, it's the driver's responsibility to pay attention to the road. That's paramount. It's their responsibility. Plus, there was also alcohol involved. You have to consider that. It's important to understand that there are certain times where deaf culture can be used as an excuse, and other times, sorry, it's deaf culture, too bad. The more we study, we'll be able to distinguish what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Now I'd like to discuss a little bit about definitions, community, as well as the definition of culture. There's really complex terms, and their definition has changed over time. You can take a look at this picture. What do you see? Right. There is two distinct perspectives that can be placed on this picture. The first is the face of two women facing each other. Or you have the perspective of the vase in the center. Which did you see? Really, it depends on your perspective. And it's neither or both. How you look at the picture and what you're focusing on. If you want to see the two women's faces, you'll see the two women's faces, regardless of what's in the middle. If what you're looking for is the vase in the center, the faces change. The same can be applied to the definitions of community and culture. It's really complex. Let's talk about community. Community means really a lot of things. It can include, there's probably about 94 different changes to the definition since its inception. One example of community, better to give examples of community. It involves people, first and foremost. You need people. Without people, you cannot have a community. People must be involved. They must have a shared language, ability to communicate with each other. They must also have social services, support services, organizations, governments, and the like. Institutions, hospitals, a number of things are required to have a community. A locale. Also, there has to be a place for people to congregate. And that is a community. That is the definition of community we will use. Now take that and apply it to the deaf community. We'll discuss that in a moment. Community and culture go hand in hand. Without a community, you can't have a culture. Without a culture, you can't have a community. They go hand in hand, they are interwoven. Today we'll discuss about the meaning of culture. An article by Raymond Williams identifies culture very complexity. A lot of complexities into that article. But I want to focus on a few items that actually apply directly to deaf culture. First of all, to have a culture, you must have people. The people have what they do in their daily routines. Secondly, must have a language. Third, they must have their own cultural rules, norms, and mores. Values, beliefs, and philosophies are also important. Traditions also come into play and affect cultures. It influences a person's identity. When they have all of these items, and others do not have those items, it gives an identity. And that, in a nutshell, is culture. And that's the definition we will apply to deaf culture today. The cultural definition has many, many different aspects to it. Family, education, society, the list goes on. But paramount about this is language. I want to focus a great deal on language today. Now you see the signs I use, both language with an L, language without the L. Both are acceptable, however this sign is a little bit more academically snobbish, if you will. There's some meaning behind that. The L initialized sign is a borrowing of English, whereas the other sign is more of a rebellion to the more ASL. Both signs are acceptable, however. What's important, language is so important, it has three of the three items. You have community, culture, and then language. And these three items overlap, and in the center you find a core, as you see it to the side. What this means is it sets up a system. Everyone knows the rules of the language, the grammar. The language also has symbols. These symbols can take a variety of forms, from visual hand shapes used in sign language or spoken word parts. Written letters in the written form of communication. Those are all symbols. Next, language must be able to change, be malleable. They have to take influences from other languages. Latin is considered a dead language for the very reason that it was Stoic. It would not take influences from other languages. And it died away as a result. So it's important as we move along through history to change the language and take those influences from other languages. The culture, the community, all plays into that. So the integration of the language, community, and culture is so important. Let me give you a couple of examples. Let's look at Maine. The community in Maine is one of strong fisherman culture. It's up in the north coast with a great deal of ocean. Fog is very prominent there. Fishing boats are found everywhere along the marina. Workers' business is mainly about fishing. That community is founded in that area. The culture is one of eating fish, lots of seafood. Their clothing is mainly focused on keeping rain out, including boots, raincoats. The culture influences all of that. The language, of course, being English, but they have a number of other things that apply here. For example, fog. They have different words for fog, from light to heavy pea soup like fog. So looking into it from that lens, there's cultural influence on that. Let's take another example for the Inuit culture, also known as Eskimo. I believe the sign is for this. I'm not sure if we're still using this sign or not. I'm not sure. But it is a native culture. And the persons from that area are found in the northern part near the Arctic. And that area is very cold. The people who live there, the native persons who live there, their homes are made of ice. Many of their homes are made of ice, called igloos. You can see the communities based on that. Culture is one where a lot of fur is worn. And they use animal skins for heat. Those they've hunted from. They eat number of types of fish, including all parts of the fish, including eyes at some point. I don't know how I would do that, but I'd be willing to try. Their language, they have their own language as well, and it's interesting. They have terms for snow as numerous as can be found. I think 9, 10, 25 different types of snow. Each has its own word. So you have community, culture, and language, and compare those between different areas, and you'll see how that links to deaf people. Well, we've just explained about both Maine and the Inuit people, their communities, their language, and their culture. Now I'd like to see how that focuses to deaf communities. We have communities all over the United States who use American Sign Language as their main form of communication. Deaf people have clubs for the deaf clubs, where people congregate. They have community service supports. They have schools for the deaf. They have communities. They have deaf culture. They have typical behaviors found among the community, their own values, beliefs, and traditions. They have we have this sign, for example, here, the ILY sign. I love you. That's a very typically deaf term. They have language, ASL, American Sign Language. It's a very visual language. It has structure, it has a system, it has rules, it has grammar, the list goes on. They have poetry. And poetry has its own rules that are different from English. The hand shapes and the like. Deaf tend to have their own jokes, humorous jokes, sometimes dirty. And the signs are not going to be the same all across. You'll find dialect differences all across the country, regions, cities, country. And we'll discuss that in a future lesson. So they do have community, culture, and language. So it's something special to be found for deaf people. And we'll discuss more about this in future lessons.